First, why should you learn C++? Well, welcome to this practical and hands-on C++ course. First, why should you learn C++? Well, with C++, you get the opportunity to work in many different fields: video games, embedded software, robotics, artificial intelligence, operating systems, and many more. C++ is maybe a little bit more difficult to learn than other languages, such as Python or JavaScript, but the reward is huge. You get to program with one of the most powerful languages, and you also get more chances to find a higher paid job. All the top tech companies are hiring C++ developers. If you know C++, you are going to stand out. And if they hire you for a C++ position, you will usually get a better salary. And now, whether you have never used C++ before and want to learn the basics fast in an easy way, or if you are already a C++ developer and want a quick refresher, well, this course is what you need. My teaching method focuses on learning by doing and going to the point. I will show you exactly what you need to learn in a practical way, step by step. You will start by installing the tools to program with C++ on your computer for Windows, Linux, and macOS. Then you will learn C++ through 4 different levels that are built on top of each other so you can easily make progress. Everything is covered. For each level, you will learn with me through hands-on lessons only and practice on the key concepts with additional exercises. I have also included an extra bonus section on object-oriented programming with C++. Now, of course, I don't claim to teach you everything there is to know about C++. Instead, I've chosen to make the course as short as possible and focus on the main concepts you are really going to need first. So, at the end of the course, you will master the C++ basics and you will be able to use this strong foundation to start learning and working on any other kind of project. And now, just a few words about me. My name is Edward, I'm a software engineer and entrepreneur. I have used C++ to build many different things. For example, a few years ago, I co-founded a robotic startup, and thanks to C++, I could write a powerful and complete software for a robotic arm, which was running on an embedded computer with very limited resources. Today, I am focusing on sharing my knowledge in the easiest possible way for anyone to understand. Alright, so if you want to learn C++ fast by directly going to the point, wait no more and let's get started. Here is how I suggest you to follow the course so you can get the most out of it and be able to program with C++ on your own. So the course is divided into 4 levels plus 1 bonus section on object-oriented programming. For each C++ level, you get a set of hands-on lessons and then some exercises to practice on what you have just seen. And to get the most out of the first 4 C++ levels, for each level do the following. First, watch the complete section without stopping until you reach the exercises. And then come back to the beginning of the section and rewatch the lessons one by one using the pause and the rewind buttons so you can better understand. And after that, do the exercises. Make sure to take enough time to work by yourself before you watch the solution. And some general tips for the whole course. Watch in the order, don't skip any lesson, because each lesson is built on top of what you have just seen before. And finally, don't hesitate to experiment on your own outside of the scope of this course. The more curious you are, the more you practice, the faster you will progress. Alright, now enough talking and let's install what we need to write, compile, and run C++ code. The first thing we need is to have a tool to be able to write C++ code. So you could totally open any text editor you want and start writing code. However, that's not going to be very practical. Here we will install an IDE, which means Integrated Development Environment. Very basically put, this software will allow you to write code, but also to use features such as auto-completion. You can compile your code, run your programs, organize your project, etc., etc. And there are many different IDEs. The one I've chosen here is Visual Studio Code, or VS Code, which is an open source and multi-platform IDE. You can use it for free on Windows, Linux, and macOS. And the interface is quite nice to begin with, and this software is actually used by many developers all over the world. So what I advise you to do is to follow the course using Visual Studio Code so you have the exact same setup as me. And then of course, as you progress more and more and work on different projects, feel free to test other development tools and choose the one that you prefer. And so let's start the installation. I will provide the instructions for Windows, Linux, and macOS. You can see the timestamp here on the video for each operating system. And let's start with Windows. So you can just open any web browser on Windows and type VS Code and just go to the first link, Visual Studio Code, and you should get to this page. And here it's pretty easy. You have a big blue button, download for Windows. Okay, so you can click here and you can see, well, you have different versions for different operating systems. But you can download for Windows the stable build. So just click here and you should see that you have something that's being downloaded. So you wait a few seconds. Okay, and now once you have the executable, you can just click and execute this so we can start the installation. Okay, and you first need to accept the license, of course. Next, then you can choose where to install Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to keep it like this by default. Okay, next. You're going to keep those options by default. And then let's install. Okay, and the installation is finished. But I'm going to uncheck this. We're not going to start Visual Studio Code right now. I'm just going to click on finish. And the thing is, well, that's not all, because now we have a tool to write C++ code, but we don't have a compiler. Okay, for C++, you actually need to compile the code before you can run it. And this compiler doesn't exist by default on Windows. So what you need to do is to install VS Code and a C++ compiler. And let's actually check if we have one. We can, so you can click on the search bar or use the Windows key and type CMD. So CMD or command or terminal, and you should see a command prompt. Okay, so you can just click on this and it will open a terminal, and you can just do G++ -- version to see what you get. And if you see this G++ is not recognized, it means that simply you don't have a C++ compiler. So we are going to install one right now. And to install a compiler for C++, there is actually a good help here on the Visual Studio Code website. So you can just type VS Code C++ and you will get to this page. You can see C++ programming for Visual Studio Code. You have the URL here if you want, but just typing VS Code C++ on Google, you should find that. And it starts with, well, the extension that we're going to see actually in the next video. So we are not going to talk about this now, but you can see we need to install a compiler because VS Code is not a compiler. And you can see, you can check if you have a compiler installed with G++ version. That's the command we have just run. And we have seen we don't have a compiler. So let's install one. And you can see we can install min_gwx64. And here, well, there are quite a few steps to do. So just follow along what I do, okay, step by step, take your time. Just make sure that you do all of the steps one by one. So let's open this on the side. And we will actually need to install msys2. Okay, so from there, we can install the compiler. And here, well, you can just follow this. So you can download the installer. You can click on this. And once you have the executable, you just run the executable to install it. Okay, so welcome to the msys2 setup. Let's click on next. You can just leave it by default. Next. Okay, next, and just wait a bit. And once the installation is complete, if you want, you can just leave this and click on finish to run it. But if you, let's say you have not clicked on it, or if you want to run it afterwards, so let's click on finish. And you can just, as well, you click on the Windows bar or press on Windows and type msys2. You can find here, actually, it's an app. So you click on this, and this app is actually going to open a kind of a terminal. And I will zoom in a bit with the control and the mouse here so you can see. So don't be afraid by this. We are going to need to run a few commands, but you just need to copy and paste. Okay, there is nothing to really understand here. So let's go on the documentation page here and let's go down, and we actually need to run this command. So what you can do is just select, so don't select the $, just select this pacman plus the rest of the command, and you can do copy, and then let's go here and let's do paste. Okay, you make sure you copy exactly this. Make sure that you don't have anything before the P of pacman. If you have something, you just remove it. So you can just press enter here, and here you will see proceed with installation. You can just press enter again, and you wait. You can see it's gonna download and install stuff, so you just wait a bit. Okay, so that was the first command to run, and there is a second one. So here we are done with this page. You can go back to the page here on Visual Studio Code. Okay, so we have just installed msys2. We have installed the first, we have run the first command, and we need to run the second command, which is this one. Okay, you need to install the toolchain here. So just basically copy this command, copy, and then paste. So do the same, right click and then paste, and you just make sure that you have exactly the command, and then you can just click on enter and wait. This may take some time. Here actually, well, it asks you to enter a selection. So which one do you want to install? Actually, we want to install all. So we just press on enter again, and we just press on enter again. You can see it's gonna install 1 GB here, so it may take some time. All right, and when you see this, so when it's back to this, the command is successfully executed and you have installed everything that you need. So now what you can do is you can just close this window. And well, there is actually one more thing to do, so that's going to be the last thing. You need to modify an environment variable so that actually Windows can know which compiler to use. So let's actually see how to do that. And it's not very difficult. What you can do is, again, you press the Windows key or you click on the search bar and you can just do environment like this. And actually you can see you have something like edit the system environment variables. Okay, so you might even type this exactly. And once you find this, you can click and you will have this window where you can click on environment variables. And here we will need to choose the one named path here on the top. And you can click, so you click on path and then you click on edit. And you can see you should already have, so it depends. I have already 4 different lines here. Maybe you have 4, maybe you have more, maybe less. It doesn't really matter. And we're going to add a new one. And this new one, actually, you can see it's going to be the path to where the compiler is installed. Okay, so this should be the path. But to make sure you can open a new file explorer and just go to your PC. And well, here you can see I have my drive C, and then I have MSys64, that's where it was installed. And then I have Ming W64 here, and then I go to bin, and in bin I should see a lot of stuff. Okay, so you don't need to check more than that, just make sure that you have some stuff here, it means it was correctly installed. And then if I click here on the bar on the top, if I click here, you can see I can select the path, and the path is exactly the same as this one. So I'm just gonna copy this, go back to my environment variables here, and click on new, and I will just paste that. Okay, so it's gonna be CMSys64 min GW64 and then bin. Okay, you click on OK, and then you can click on OK again, click on OK, and now, well, let's open a, so let's close this and let's open again with CMD. Okay, you click on CMD and let's do G++ -- version. And you can see now we have something very different. Now we have G++ with a version number. And it doesn't really matter that you have the same version as me or not. The important point is you actually have G++ installed. And now everything is ready for you to write C++ code and to execute C++ code. What you can do is you can start Visual Studio Code. And the same thing, we can search here for Visual Studio Code. You can just click on this and it will start it. And now here are the instructions for how to install Visual Studio Code on Linux, and as you will see, it's much easier than on Windows. So the first thing is that on Linux, by default, you will have G++ installed for you. So if you do G++ -- version, you will already have something working here. So you don't need to install G++, it's already here for you. And then, well, to install VS Code, you can search here in applications. So you have the graphical way to do that, or you have the terminal way. So I'm going to show you both. You can just search here for programs, okay? And so, well, for example, here I have Ubuntu software, okay? And if you explore and you search for Visual Studio Code, well, you can see you will find Visual Studio Code and you can just install it or remove it. So here I already installed it before, but you can just simply remove it or install it like that. And then if you want to use the terminal, because, well, we are on Linux, so let's use the terminal. If you are actually on Ubuntu, you can use the snap package manager. And so you can just install VS Code with just one command line. You do sudo snap install code. So that is named code, not VS Code. And then -- classic. You press enter, you provide your password. And well, actually it's already installed for me, but it's going to download. So it's going to take a few seconds and then install for you. And it will be installed. Then if you, so I'm going to go on this page here, you can see the URL here, so code.visualstudio.com/docs/setup/linux. This is going to be the help for how to install Visual Studio Code on Linux. So you can see here the snap installation for Ubuntu. And you can see if you want to install with directly the .deb package, okay, so you have a bit more instructions and for different OSs. So if you have a specific Linux installation and you know what you're doing, well, you can follow the tutorials here. And then, well, once it is installed, to run Visual Studio Code, you just do code on the terminal, and that's going to start Visual Studio Code. Or you can also, here on the application, search for Visual Studio Code and you just run it from there. And well, the instructions for Mac OS are also super simple. So on Mac OS, you will have also G++ installed for you. So you have a C++ compiler, and then you can just go back to the Visual Studio Code webpage. And here, instead of Windows, you will have Mac OS, okay, stable. You can also scroll down the page and find different downloads. Okay, Universal, Intel chip, Apple Silicon. So just download whatever you need. And then you can see here also the help for the setup on Mac. So you just download basically what you found here, and then you just get the Visual Studio Code.app that you place on your applications folder, and then you just run it, and that's pretty much it. Alright, so now you have Visual Studio Code installed on your computer as well as a C++ compiler. Great, so now you have Visual Studio Code installed on your computer, okay, for any operating system, and now I'm going to show you how you can configure it so you can easily follow the course and develop with C++. And the instructions here are going to be valid for any operating system. So I'm going to do something is to go on View here, Appearance, and zoom in. You can see you have the shortcuts, okay? Shortcuts may vary depending on your OS. Okay, and I'm going to basically zoom in a few times, okay? Because, well, it's quite small and it's going to be easier for you to read with this size. Okay, and now what I'm going to do, I'm going to install some extension. Okay, so here on the left, you can see we have the Explorer with our files that we're going to see later, then a bunch of stuff, and you can see these extensions. So one of the powerful functionality of VS Code is you can install plugins or extensions to improve the capabilities of the IDE. And I'm going to search for C++. And you can see here, so the first one is that one, C++ by Microsoft. So that's the one we want, okay? So I'm going to click on Install. It's installing and now it's installed. This will allow you to have stuff like auto-completion for C++, which is super, super useful. Okay, so I'm going to close that. And then I'm going to search for Code Runner. And we are going to check Code Runner, so you should see that. So .run for the image. And you are going to also install that one. So basically you can't just run C++ code from your IDE. Okay, you can write code, but then you will need to compile it and run it outside or using the terminal. With the Code Runner extension, we have a very simple tool that allows us to, as you can see here, we have a play button. So with the play button, we can run the code. So that's the two extensions we are going to use, C++, and then Code Runner. That's pretty much it. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to go on Settings, so File, Preferences, Settings. Okay, I'm going here to search for, so on the left, Extensions, and then scroll and find Run Code Configuration. So Run Code Configuration is the configuration for the Code Runner extension we have just installed. Okay, we need just to check a few things here. So you can scroll down and, well, okay, actually it's already checked for me, but it will be like this for you. It's because I had some previous configuration on my computer. So you want to check Run in Terminal, and you want to check Save All Files Before Run, okay? So those are the two options we are going to need for this course. Okay, and now you can close the settings. So as you can see, everything you open is kind of a new tab on the top. So you just close that. And now we are going to, I'm going to go back to Explorer, and we are going to clean a few things, okay? So you can go on View, Appearance, and then you can see Show, Bar, etc. So you have different bars that you can hide if you want to. And I'm going to unclick the Show Activity Bar. So as you can see, this is gone. And I'm going also to do Show Status Bar. Okay, you can see this is the one on the bottom. So Show Status Bar. Okay, so we have more space, at least for you to read on my screen, but you can keep the status bar on your computer. And then one important tip also is you can see this is the menu bar. Okay, thing is that if you click on Show Menu Bar and if you unclick that one, well, the menu bar is gone and well, you can't just click on it anymore. So if you have done that, you can use the shortcut Control Shift and P, or maybe Command Shift and P on macOS, and search for Toggle Menu Bar, and you can click on that, and that's going to put the menu bar back in the screen. And then finally, I'm going to go full screen, so you can go on Appearance, full screen, or just press F11, and you are full screen. And the menu bar here, if you just want to show it in full screen, you just press on Alt, okay, and you have the menu bar. Okay, Alt to show it, or just hide it. Okay, so that's the interface I'm personally going to use for this course. So for you, check the different view options and appearance to just be comfortable with what you write on your computer. Okay, and now we have everything ready to start writing C++ code. With the setup and configuration, everything should work correctly, so you can focus 100% on learning C++ efficiently. And before we dive in, actually, let's just create a project on VS Code for our C++ files. So to do that, I'm first going to create a folder directly from a file manager. So you open a file manager on Windows, Linux, or macOS. And well, I'm just going to go to my home directory here. So choose any place you want, any folder you want. And from my home directory here on Windows, I'm going to create a new folder. named, for example, VSCode_project. So in that folder, I'm going to put all my VS Code projects. And here in my VS Code project folder, I'm going to create a new folder that I'm going to use as a project. I'm going to simply name it course project, okay, for this course. And I'm going to use this folder as a project for the complete course. And then I'm going to organize the code inside that project. So now I can close this. And here I can click on open folder here, or also file, open folder. That's the same thing. And I'm going to search for, so I'm in my home directory, just search for the folder you have created, select folder, and you can click on yes, I trust the authors. Okay, quit the welcome screen, we don't need that. And then you can see you have course project here, so that's a new folder. And in that folder, we are going then to be able to right click and to do new file, new folder, and to create and to organize C++ files, okay? And now let's say you want to reopen that from somewhere else. So if you want to close, you can just do here, close folder, okay? And if you want to open it, you just go back to open folder, you just search for it, course project, and you make sure it's here, select folder, and you are back to the course project. In the following lessons, you are going to write your first C++ program and learn some of the most important programming concepts. We will start directly with the code and with practice, no fancy theoretical explanation. First, you will discover what is the minimal code structure you need to write in order to run a C++ program. I will introduce the concept of variables, and through an example you will understand why you need them and how to use them. You will also get to know the different types of variables you can use to represent different kinds of numbers and data. We will also practice with lists or arrays to store a collection of variables. At the end of the section, you will be able to write short C++ programs and in which you are going to interact with the user and store the values you got with variables. And now, as I previously said in the introduction, I encourage you to first watch the entire section, even if you don't understand everything. Then you might try to do the exercises or to watch the lessons again, this time using the pause and rewind buttons. Alright, let's get started. In this lesson, you are going to write your very first C++ program. You will see what is the minimum code structure you need and how to make your program print something as a result. So make sure you have the correct C++ compiler, the correct setup, and also the course project folder here. If not, go back to the introduction section to install and set up everything. So first of all, to write a C++ program, we need to create a C++ file. So inside my course project, here I'm going to right click, new folder, and we are in the basics, so underscore level underscore 1, so basics level 1 of this course. Inside this new folder, I'm going to right click and do new file. I'm going to name it hello.cpp. So that's our first C++ file. You can see we have a new tab here and the file in the text editor. So first important thing, when you create a C++ file, use the .cpp extension. Very important. And then to name the file, don't put any space. Okay, if you want to put some spaces between words, you can use, for example, here underscores, okay, as I did for the folders names. And let's write some C++ code. And actually, we can't just write C++ instructions like that. We first need to write a minimal code structure. So let's do this. So you can type int, like this, space, main, open close parenthesis, then go back to a new line and open close curly brackets. And you can see, for example, that this is a feature of a good IDE. It's going to, when you open a curly bracket, it's going to close it automatically. So then you can press enter, and you can see now the cursor has an indentation of 4 spaces here. Okay, this is the indentation in C++ is not mandatory, okay, but this is so when you write code, this is going to be much clearer and much more readable. So int main open close parentheses, open close curly brackets, and then you can do return space 0 and then semicolon. This is the minimal code structure you need for a C++ program. So that's not big. And well, what is this? Int main is basically a function that is going to return an integer number. So in that function, we have then nothing and return 0, which means it's going to return 0, which is an integer number, and we finish the statement with a semicolon. So I'm going to explain everything about functions later in this course. For now, you just need to know you have to write this. And then where are you going to write your instructions? Well, you are going to write your instructions inside the curly brackets here and before return 0. And well, it's very important you have exactly this, okay? This function should be named main exactly and not something else. Now, if I compile and run this program, nothing will happen. The program will just run and exit directly because we don't have any other instructions. So what I'm going to add is an instruction to print something on the terminal. And to do that, I am first going to need to here add hashtag include, and as you can see, we have auto-completion. So on VS Code with the C++ extension, you have auto-completion, so you can see some suggestions of what you could write, and if you have a suggestion, the first one is going to be automatically completed if you press tab. So I press tab, and you can see include. And then I'm going to put some angle bracket and type IOStream. And as you can see, when I start to type IOStream, I have this, I press tab again, it's going to finish the word and also close the angle bracket. So this instruction, include with angle bracket, is going to include a C++ library. And we will need this library to actually be able to print something. So nothing to really understand here, is just like that. And then to print something, you have a function, so functionality, which is std : cout. And you can see the auto-completion again. Okay, you can just browse the different functionality and choose the one with the arrow keys and with tab. And then we will need angle bracket twice. Then I'm going to put double quotes. As you can see, when I put double quotes once, it's going to put two, and I can write some text. Let's say hello, and then space, angle brackets twice again, and then std : and L for end line. Okay. So if I just print hello, it's going to print hello, and then everything else is going to be printed just after hello on the same line on the terminal. If I want to go back to a new line, which is usually what you want to do when you print something, you are going to add end L, which is basically end line. And then if you want to finish a statement in C++, you have to add a semicolon. The semicolon is super useful. As you can see, we have one here and one here. This means that the statement here is finished. You can now process the next statement, okay? And here, well, what do we have? So what's going to happen is that when you run your program, the main function here is going to be called first thing. And everything in the main is going to be executed simply in the order of the code. Okay, so this line, this instruction is going to be executed, semicolon, end of instruction. And then whatever is after that, then we go to the new line, and we have another instruction. So of course, best practice is to put just one instruction per line. Okay, I could just do this. This would be correct. Okay, that's one instruction, semicolon, one instruction, semicolon. But that's not readable, so I'm going to do that. Okay, so line 5 is going to be executed, line 6 is going to be executed, and then we go out of the main, and that's it. So it's pretty easy to see the order of execution. And now, well, how can we execute that code? Because this is just some code. How can we make sure it's going to be executed? Well, we will need to compile the code because C++ is a compiled language. So very basically put, you have your C++ code that we have just written with the main function. You are going to use a compiler, okay? And this compiler is going to create an executable file. And then from that executable file, you will be able to run the executable file, and this is going to execute the program that you have written. So you can see we have two steps here, the compilation and then runtime. And so back to our program. Well, with the code runner extension I have installed on Visual Studio Code, what's going to happen is exactly that. So I click on run. What's going to happen is going to first compile the code. So you can see here, okay, this might be quite, this might look quite complicated, but you don't need to understand everything, and I'm going to show you the important parts. So first you can see what is going to execute when you press on run. So cd is basically go to that folder. So basically go to the folder where the C++ file is. And then you have G++. If you remember, G++ is actually in the terminal the command to compile a C++ file. So it's going to compile the hello.cpp that is here into a hello executable. As you can see, when we do this, when we press run, on the left, we have a new file, hello.exe. So .exe is going to be maybe specific to Windows. If you are on a Linux system, you are just going to see hello, which is an executable. And then this is simply run the executable. So compile and run. This is what's going to happen with the button here. So we are going to see how to do that manually later in this course, but for now you can see that basically that's what's going to happen. And then after that, you have whatever you print from your program is going to be printed on the terminal here on the terminal window. And you can see hello, because we have printed hello here. So the program is working. All right, and now let's say I want to modify this program. I want to add another line. Let's say I can just copy this with Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V on a new line. And let's put test ABC. So I'm going to click on that. It's going to save and run the file. Okay, so it's going to save and then of course compile and run the file, and you can see hello test ABC. Okay, now I'm just going to show you what's going to happen. For example, if you have an error, let's say I forgot the semicolon here. So you will see first that on Visual Studio Code you will have some help. Okay, you will see something red, expected a semicolon. So that's something you can already spot on Visual Studio Code, but then if you try to compile and run, and you can see here we have an error. Okay, that's not the same output as before. We have an error saying in function main, which is that one, on line 6, you can see line 6, and then colon 41, expected semicolon before return. Okay, you can see here the error is quite explicit. Okay, so here it tells you that you have to put a semicolon here. Sometimes the error will be explicit, sometimes not. Okay, but here you can see it's super easy to spot it and solve it. And now it's running when I put the semicolon. Okay, great. Now you know how to write a minimal C++ program, how to print something on the terminal, and how to use VS Code to save the program, run the program, check errors, and use autocompletion. Let's now see what variables are. This concept is the most basic and maybe the most important when programming. And actually, before you learn what variables are, let's first understand why you need to use variables with an example. So I'm going to write some code. I'm going to just use this program and I'm going to write some code. So I can print here what is called here a string, okay, which is a chain of characters, or I can just print also numbers, okay, for example 2. And I can also put a computation, for example 2 plus 1. So let's say I want to put 2 and then 2 plus 1, 2 plus 2, 2 plus 3. So I want to print 2, 3, 4, 5, for example, with this syntax, a number, and then number plus 1, number plus 2, number plus 3. So if I run that code, you can see I have 2, 3, 4, 5, which is what we expected. Now the thing is that, let's say I want to start from the number 3, for example. If I want to start from the number 3, I need to change to here, I need to change here, and change here, and change here. If I run it, it's working, we have 3, 4, 5, 6. Now let's say we have to change this value in many more places because this program is super short, it's only 10 lines. Okay, let's say we have a program with many hundreds of lines. You can see that's going to be quite inconvenient to change that value every time we want to change the number. Another example is, let's say you are programming a video game and you have a character who has a life which starts at 100, and then let's say the life will go at 70, 65 every time it takes damages. And so the value will be changed, and it will be changed by outside events. So for stuff like life of a character, it's going to be impossible to just hard code a value like this. You will need something like a sort of container for that value, so you can store that value, you can also modify it, and you can reuse it later. And well, that's exactly what is a variable. So now I'm coming back to this program, and I'm going to create a variable. Okay, so instead of just hard coding a value, for example 3, 5, etc., I can just use a variable. I'm going to create a variable int number is equal to 3, and then semicolon. Okay, so I'm just going to use it and then come back to it to explain more about this. So now I have a variable named number which contains 3. So what I can do, I can just put number here, okay, and when I put number, it's going to be replaced by its value, which is 3. Okay, and I can put number actually here, but also here, and also here. Okay, now if I run this code, you can see we still have the same output, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I put, let's say, 10, I just need to change it once here, and it's going to be changed every time. I run the code, and you can see 10, 11, 12, 13. So with this variable, we have something to store a value, and then we can retrieve it later in the program. So now that you have a better overview of why you need variables, I'm going to just remove everything, and I'm going to create a new variable and explain to you exactly how to use them correctly. So I'm going to create int a. So to create a variable, you first need to provide a data type. The data type is what kind of value you are going to put inside the variable. So I'm going to come back to this later. For now, I use int, okay, which is integer or round numbers. After this, you need to provide a name for the variable. So here I can just name it a. Okay, that is a valid name. And after that, here I have a semicolon. So this is going to declare a variable. This is the most basic thing you can do, is to declare a variable. After you have declared a variable, so it doesn't contain any value, after you have declared a variable, you can assign a value to it. So I can do a is equal to 2. And of course, as you can see, every time I use a statement, I use a semicolon. So here I declare a variable and I initialize the variable. Two different steps. What I can also do is I can declare the variable and initialize the value directly in the same line. And then, well, I can print that variable with std_cout a, and then std end line, like this, semicolon. I just run play, and you can see we have 2, okay, which is what's inside the variable. What I can also do, for example, here I declare the variable and I initialize it here. I can also declare it here, int a, for example. I can declare and initialize it here, and I can also declare it here and initialize it in the main. That's also going to work. As you can see here, we also have 2. And so the value you put inside, you can actually put the direct value like this. 2, you can also put a combination of value, for example, a computation like 2 plus 3, and you can see a is going to be equal to 5, or 2 multiplied by 3, a is going to be equal to 6. Okay, you can use this operator divided by minus, okay, 2 minus 3, you can see a is going to be minus 1. So you can use any computation you want, okay, to put a value inside a variable. And then I can create other variables, for example, int b is equal to a different value. What I can also do is create a variable from another variable. Let's say I put int b is equal to a plus 2. Like this. I run the code, so let's actually print b here instead of a. I run the code and you can see now b is equal to 1, okay, because a was minus 1 plus 2 is equal to 1. So what's going to happen is that at this time, this a is going to be evaluated to its current value, which is going to be minus 1. And then this is going to be evaluated to 1, and this is going to be assigned to the variable b. I can create another variable, let's say c is equal to a plus b, for example, and I run the code, and you can see, well, now if I print c, you can see that c is equal to 0, okay, because this is minus 1, this is 1. Now let's say that I modify a, let's say that I put a is equal to 10 after creating c. So what's going to happen? Do you think that c is going to be modified or c is going to be the same? Well, let's check. Let's run that. And you can see that c is still equal to 0. Okay. Why is that? Because here we have modified a to 10. But remember that each line is going to be executed one by one in the order. So here at this time on line 9, c is going to be assigned the value of a plus b at this time of the program. So at this time of the program, a is equal to minus 1. So minus 1 plus 1 is equal to 0, which is assigned to variable c. After that, we go to line 10, and then we change the variable a. We assign a new value to the variable a. But c is not going to be changed because it was already assigned, and a was evaluated here before line 10. Okay, so the order is very important. If I put this line before creating the variable c, you can see that now the variable c is equal to 11. Because at this time of the program, a is equal to 10, not minus 1. Okay, so that's very important. When you modify variables and when you assign values to variables, the order of your code is very important for that. So, well, that's the basics of variables. And now, well, to do tests, it's quite useful to use A, B, C, D, etc. But when we program in real life, the best practice is to use meaningful names for variables. So by meaningful names, I mean, for example, let's say that you have a temperature. Then for a temperature, you are going to use int temperature. You are not going to name it T or TPR or whatever. You are going to name it temperature because that's what a temperature is, okay? If you have, let's say, user age, then you can use int user age. And as you can see here, if you have a space, you can put spaces, but you are not going to use spaces. You are going to use underscores, for example. So whenever we program, we are going to try to use meaningful names for our variables so that the variable represents what's inside, and whenever who reads it, so that can be you in the future or someone else, can easily understand what you have written. Alright, now to recap on variables. So a variable is a container that you can use to store a value and reuse that value later in the program. To create a variable, you first need to declare it with a data type and a name, and then on the same line or in a different line, you can assign a value to it. You can now declare, initialize, and modify variables. So far, we have only seen the integer data type with int, but actually there are more types you can use. Here I'm going to show you the most important ones that you are really going to use in your future C++ programs. So what kind of data type do we need? We already have integer numbers. Okay, so I'm going to remove this and this and just print user age. I'm going to put a value in user age, let's say 34. So we have integer numbers for round numbers. So round numbers can be 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. and can also be negative numbers. Now we also need to have float numbers. Okay, so let's say you have something that is 10.5. With integer you can't store 10.5. So you have what we call float numbers, and for the float numbers the data type for C++ is double. You can see double, it should turn blue. So double, let's say we have a temperature, and the temperature is 20.6 Celsius degrees. And I can use, so I'm going to copy this and paste it here, and I can use temperature. As you can see, I have the auto-completion also because I create a variable. I can use the auto-completion for the variable here. by pressing tab or by clicking on the suggestion. So here I have double, which means that I can use numbers with decimals. So that can be any positive or negative number. So with that, we are pretty good with numbers. Now there is another data type, which is the Boolean data type. And the Boolean is bool, and this is very particular. This Boolean data type only contains two possible values, true or false. So for example, is alive, if you have, let's say, a video game with a character, or if you are doing robotics and you have, for example, a motor and you want to check if the motor is alive, okay, which means that it's, for example, running and connected. And so you have two possible values, can be true, as you can see here, it should turn blue, or false, and then semicolon. So true and false are recognized keyword in C++, okay, that you can use for Boolean values. And this, we are going to come back later to that, for example, on conditions and loops. This is going to be super useful. And then, well, we have numbers, Booleans. What if we want to print some text, okay, or use some text in our program? We can use the std, so colon, string data type. So let's say user name is equal to Bob, with just one E. So std colon string. So that is the same thing as to create other variables, okay? You just put the type first, the name, and then equal if you want to assign also a value, and then you can use double quotes and the string you want to put inside that variable. Let's print, so let's do this 2 more times, and let's print instead of temperature is alive, and user name. You can see I just start the word and then I press tab, username. Also note that any line that has nothing in it will just not be executed, but that can be nice, as you can see here, to add more readability to the code. And let's run that. Okay, you can see we have the different values here, 34, 20.6, we have 0, okay, because when you actually print a Boolean, you are not going to see false or true, you are going to see 0 or 1. Okay, so 0 for false and 1 for true. That's what you are going to see, but that's actually in the code a Boolean. And then Bob for the string. All right, so here you have, I would say, the 4 main data types that you are going to need to use when you begin with C++. And as you can see, we have used meaningful names directly here. We don't use A, B, or C anymore. And so to recap, when you declare a variable in C++, the first thing you need to do is to give it a type. Once the type is chosen, this is going to be the type for the entire life of the variable. And so to know which type you should choose, you can ask yourself, what kind of data am I trying to store here for this specific variable? So you have seen that after that you create a variable, then you can modify it at any time and any number of times. What if you want now to create a variable that can't be modified in the future? This variable will be called a constant variable. For example, you want to create a variable to keep the number of seconds per hour. Let's say here int seconds per hour, which is equal to 3600. And that, I mean, this can't be changed, okay? That's how it is. That value can't be changed. Or let's say you want to create a variable to hold the maximum possible temperature that your computer can reach before your program shuts it down. So let's say double max, let's say allowed temperature is equal to, and let's say 76.8 degrees. Also, I'm talking about Celsius degrees here. So you may want to block that maximum allowed temperature, because if it's modified later on in your program to a bigger value, you have the risk that your computer is going to die because of heat. And so for those two scenarios here, you can create a constant variable which will make sure that this value will not be modified in the future. And to do that, it's very simple. You just add, before you create the variable, before the type, you add const. So the const keyword, which is for constant. So now let's say I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to print here seconds per hour, and I'm going to print here max. So once again, I use the autocompletion, max allowed temperature. Okay, so let's print that. You can see we have the two values here. And now I'm going to try to modify seconds per hour is equal to, let's say, 3. So this is an integer. I'm just trying to modify the integer. Now, if I run that, actually, we have an error at compilation, because you can see error, assignment of read-only variable seconds per hour. So read-only means you can only read it, so you can only get access to it, but you can't modify it, okay, because of the const keyword. So here, because you have put const, you make sure that this line is not going to pass the compilation time. This line is not going to be valid, so we can't modify those two variables. we can still modify user age, temperature, etc. Okay, that's going to work, but not those two here. And a specific rule also to constant variable is that you have to declare the variable and initialize it on the same line. Okay, I can't do this, seconds per hour. So this we have seen it's valid for any other variable, which is to declare the variable and then initialize it. This is not going to work. As you can see here, we have errors. And when I run the program, you can see uninitialized constant here, and of course then assignment of read-only variable. So you have to initialize a constant when you declare it. So we can do this here and just remove that line, and everything is okay. So to recap, use the const keyword before declaring a variable if you want to make sure that the value inside the variable won't be modified in other parts of the program. You can now store different kinds of values into variables. Now imagine that you have to read some temperatures from a temperature sensor and store all the temperatures so you can process them. If you have 10 temperatures, you will have to create 10 variables, for example, temperature 1, temperature 2, etc. As you can see, that's not really practical. And now imagine that you have to store not 10, but 10,000 values. That's just going to be impossible. So how are you going to solve that problem? Well, this is where you can use what we call arrays. And what is an array? An array is simply a collection of values that are related to each other and share the same data type. For example, you could have an array to store all students' names for a classroom. Here we are going to create one to store temperatures using the double data type. So for this, I'm going to create a new file here, for example, and so in the basics level 1, new files, arrays.cpp, okay, and I'm going to add include iostream, so we can print stuff, and then int main curly brackets return 0. So I just create the minimal structure once more, okay, which is super fast to do. And so let's create an array with a few values for the temperature. So to create an array, I'm going to create an array of double. Here is the syntax. First, the data type for the element. So all elements of the array are going to be of the same data type. Then the name of the array. I'm going to name it temperature list. Okay, because, well, this is quite explicit. We are creating a list or an array, so you could name it, for example, temperature array. I'm going to name it temperature list. Or you can also use temperatures, for example, in the plural. I'm going to name it temperature list because that's super explicit. So use explicit name, that's better. And then you're going to open and close brackets, okay, so brackets like this, and you're going to put the size of the array. So you need to put a size, for example, let's say 4, which means that this array will have 4 values in it. And then I can just put a semicolon to declare the array. What I can also do is I can directly initialize, so that's a specific feature for arrays, I can just initialize the array on the same line by using curly brackets this time, and putting all the elements of the array. So for example, I have 34.5, and then 27.8, 26.8, and then 22.0. Here I have initialized my array with 4 elements. I can't put more elements than this because we have just 4 slots for the array, okay? And then what I can do with this array, what I can do is, for example, if I want to access one element, well, to access one element, so I'm going to do std_cout to be able to print. I'm going to do that here and so std and line. And if I want to access, for example, an element of the array, I'm going to put the name of the array, temperature list, and then open and close brackets, and I'm going to put the index, okay, of the element. Let's try with index number 1. So this is going to print the index number 1, so the element which corresponds to the index number 1 in the temperature list. Let's run that. Okay, so here you can see G++ with arrays.cpp this time, and then we run the arrays executable that was created here, and you can see 27.8, which corresponds actually to the second element of the array. Why is that? Simply because when programming, when we start to count, we don't start to count at 1, we start to count at 0. So if I use 0, I'm going to have the first element, 34.5. Okay, so 0, and then 1, and then 2, which is going to be the third element, 26.8, and then 3, which is going to be the last element here, the fourth one, 22. And then the thing is that if you try to access an element that is outside, okay, of this array, well, the behavior for C++ might be quite weird or basically undefined. So you want to make sure that you stay inside this array. Okay, so here if you have 4 elements, you can use index 0, 1, 2, and 3. If you have 5 elements, you can access to the index number 4, etc. So very important to stay inside of the array and start to count at 0 and not 1. Now you have seen how to get access to an element. What if I want to modify an element? So what if I want to modify actually this element with the index number 3, which is going to be 22? What I can do is simply do temperature list, and then brackets, the index of the element, and then put an equal sign and just put any other value, let's say 15.4. So this is similar as when you actually modify a variable, okay? On the left, you have here, so the variable, which is basically the element here with the index 3, and on the right, so equal sign on the right, the value you want to put in this. So here we create an array, and then we modify the value with index 3, and then we print the value with index 3. Let's see what we have here. I'm actually going to print it before and after we modify the value. So let's run that. You can see that first we have 22, and then I modify the value, and then we have 15.4. All right, so that's pretty much it about arrays, how to create and initialize them, how to modify them, and how to get access to an element. So to recap, an array is a collection of related variables sharing the same data type. To create an array, you first need to declare it and give it a size, which cannot be changed afterwards. And then you can access and modify any value from the array using an index. The array you have just seen before is actually something quite basic, which already existed in C. In C++, you can use this kind of array, of course, no problem with that, but you can also take advantage of the std library, so we have already used std here, which is the standard library for C++. And in this std library, you have a much better functionality for arrays named vector. And let's see that now. So first, one of the main issues of standard arrays in C and C++, like those ones, is that they are not dynamic at all. You choose a size at the beginning, and then that's it. But what if you don't know in advance how many elements you want in the array? What if you want to add new elements after you have created the array? And this is something you can actually solve, but it's really quite complicated. With the std vectors, you don't have this problem anymore. So let's use vectors, and let's see how we can create an array with this new functionality. To use that, we need to include, so hashtag include, and then open angle bracket, vector, close angle bracket. I'm going to put this actually here first, and I'm going to create the same thing but with vector. So I'm going to do std colon vector, and I need to open and close angle brackets and put the data type I want for the list. And I'm going to put double, okay? So here, the data type is going to be inside std vector brackets, not just at the beginning. Then I can put a name, temperature. So actually, I'm not going to name it temperature list because there is something else here named temperature list. So we can have some conflict or error in our code. I'm just going to put temperatures like this with an S and semicolon to declare the vector. As you can see here, I didn't precise any size, okay? Because the size is going to be dynamic. So I can create the vector like this, which is going to be empty. I can add new elements after that, which we are going to see. What I can also do is, just like we did with arrays, I can also, I'm going to do that, but let's put just 3 elements. I can initialize some values. So if I do this, what's going to happen is that this is going to create a vector with 3 elements here, here, and here. So this is going to be index 0, 1, and 2. Now, what if I want to access an element? So I'm going to do std cout. I can do temperatures, and then I'm going to do dot at, okay, and I'm going to give it the index. Let's say I want the first element, I'm going to put 0. This is going simply to return the first element of the vector. The vector name dot at 0 for the first element, and then std end line. Now, if I want to modify an element, that's also super easy. Temperatures dot at. Okay, let's say I want to modify with the index 1 is equal to, and let's put 30.7. Okay, so that is going to modify the element here because index 1 is the second element. I put the semicolon, and then I'm going to do this to print to see actually what happened with the element on index number 1. So let's run that. So you can see we have the first 2 prints for the first array, and then we have, so the first element, 34.5, and then we modify the second element, and then when we print the second element, we are actually the value 30.7 which was not the first value in the array. So that was modified. And you have many more functionalities. Actually, I'm going to just do a cout again. You have many more functionalities with vectors. So I can do, you can see here when I do dot, I have all the possible functions I can use with vectors. Okay, you have many functionalities. One of them is, for example, size. So I can do size, open close parentheses. This is going to return the size of the vector. And so I save the file, and if I run this, you can see that the last line will be 3, okay, because the size of the vector is 3. We have 3 elements. I'm going to show you also another useful functionality, which is to add, if you want to add a new element to the end of the vector, you can do the name of the vector, so temperatures, dot, push back, open close parentheses, and the value you want to put. So let's say 17.4, and then semicolon. So don't forget the semicolon at the end of any statement. So here, what I do is I add an element to the vector, to the array, and then I print the size of the array. Let's run this. You can see now the size is 4. Okay, here we have 3 elements, we add a new element, and we have the size. So that is super useful. So to recap, vectors are a much more powerful way to create arrays in C++. So you got the introductions to array, which is super useful to understand that at the beginning, but now what I recommend is that whenever you need to manage a collection of values or variables, I recommend that you use vectors instead of just standard arrays. And we are going to continue to work on vectors in the following of this course, as well as discover new functionalities related to them. You have seen that with the cout function, the std cout, you can print something so the user of the program, so actually the user for now is me or you, okay, can get info from the program. But we can also ask the user to write something which we can then use and store inside a variable. This will add more interactivity to the program and makes it more dynamic. And it's going to be great for your C++ learning path. So let's see how to do this. I'm just going to create a new here, new file. Let's say user input.cpp, just one E, and very quickly include iostream. Okay, iostream contains the cout function, but also the cin function we are going to use right now. Int main return 0. So how to get a value from the user? Well, first you are going to need to create a variable so you can store that value. So I'm going to create, for example, an std string, let's say username. I'm not going to define the variable, I'm just going to declare it, and we are going to put a variable from what the user gives us when we run the program. And I'm going to use std cin. Okay, you have cout and you have cin. Out to print, in to ask an information. And I'm going to use angle bracket, but this time not like this, on the opposite side. And I'm going to put username and semicolon. So here you can see it's like this is going to the right. Okay, so what you get from cin from the terminal is going to go inside username. So now if we just let's run the program actually. It's save and let's run the program. You can see now what's happening is that, well, the program hangs here. Okay, you can see the program hangs. If I press, so I can put some text. If I press enter, you can see now the program has exited. So this will wait for you to give a user input. Now, well, once we have this user input, we don't do anything with it. So let's just print it. Let's do std cout and then username and then std end line. As you can see here, the angle brackets are on the opposite direction. And let's run that. So I'm going to put Bob and I press enter and you can see we have Bob. So this will put the string Bob inside username and then we print the username. Okay. And so we have never written any Bob or any information in the program. It's just going to take the information that we give when we actually run the program. Now, so let's run it again. Let's say you want to quit the program, you don't want to put anything. What you can also do is press Ctrl C inside the terminal. Okay, when you press Ctrl C or Command C maybe, that's going to try to terminate the program. Okay, because here the program is not just going to execute and return, it's going to wait for user input. So if you don't want to give a user input, you just press Ctrl C. And well, that's pretty much it about how to get a user input, but as you can see, when we ask the user input, we don't have any information. So what we can do is add, just before cin, we can do std cout and say what we are expecting from the user, okay? For example, what is your name? I'm going to put that, I'm going to put a space and semicolon. Here I don't put end line, okay, so then we're going to put the username directly on the same line as what is your name after the space. So I can just run that, and you can see what is your name. I'm going to put Bob, press enter, and you can see Bob. So as you can see, to recap, to get the user input, you're going to use the std_cin function, and just before that you may use a std_cout to say what you are expecting from the user, okay, and then you put the value inside a variable, and after that you can use this variable in your program as you want. And of course here I'm using a string, but you can also use an integer or a boolean or a float number with double, okay, that's going to put the value in the variable accordingly. It's now time to practice on what you have seen before in this section, especially on variables. So here in this video I'm going to give you a few exercises to do, and in the next video I'm going to give you the solution for those exercises. And before you start the exercises or when doing them, if something is not clear, feel free to go back to the previous lessons, okay, to watch them again and better understand the different concepts. So here are the 3 exercises I'm going to give you now. The first one, you are going to create a program. So for each exercise you can create a new C++ program, and in this program you are going to ask for the name and the age of a user and then print the info. For example, hello username, you are user age. The second exercise, you are going to ask the user for 2 integer numbers, you are going to add those numbers and then print the result. And for the third exercise, you are going to create an array, or I would say a vector or 4 float numbers. So for that you can use the double type. You are going to compute the average inside the array and print the average. So for this exercise you may have to think a little bit more and also come back to the previous lessons. So as a reminder, for a list, the average is the sum of all the elements divided by the number of elements. So for the number of elements, I already gave you a function that does that for a vector, okay? And for the sum of all the elements, I'm going to give you now a new function, and this function is named accumulate, okay? And to use accumulate, well, you have to use accumulate with parentheses and with 3 parameters inside the parentheses. The first one is list.begin. So list is going to be the name of the vector you have, okay, that I named list here. So you are going to use the name of the vector dot begin with parentheses, and then comma, the list dot end with parentheses, and then comma, and then 0. So you don't need to understand that for now, okay, that's just the function I'm giving it to you now, so you can do the exercise. And if you want to use accumulate, you will also need to add include numeric at the beginning of your program. Alright, so now take the time to do the exercises, and I will see you in the next lesson for the solution. This is the solution for the 3 exercises I gave you in the previous lesson for the level 1 of this course. So let's start with the first exercise. I'm going to create here a new file in the basics level 1 folder named, let's say 1_1 username age.cpp. So I have my include iostream, and then I have int main with return 0. So in this program, I need to ask the user for its name and for its age. So I'm going to start with the name, and I'm going to create first a variable which will be of type string, okay, for the name. So std : string username, and then I'm going to do std_cin with angled brackets in this direction username. And before I do this, I'm also going to do std_cout with what is your name, like this, and a space, so I can have a prompt for the cin function. And then I'm going to ask for the user age. So I'm going to create another variable, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the variables here together, int user age. And I'm going to do, after these instructions, std_cout how old are you, with a space, and I'm going to do std_cin, and I'm going to put that inside user age. So I create 2 variables, and then I have 2 sets of cout, cin instructions to ask for the user to put a value inside this variable and this variable. And now that I have this, what I can do is the conclusion of this exercise, std_cout bracket, and to say, for example, hello space, another set of brackets, username, another set of brackets. So if you want to add stuff, you just use double bracket every time, okay? So here I have just a hard-coded string. Here I have a variable, so I use the string, bracket, bracket, the other string, etc. And then let's put UR with another space, 2 angle brackets, let's put user age, and then 2 angle brackets, let's put a dot at the end. As you can see, now the line starts to be quite long, okay, and it's still not finished. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut it here, for example. I'm going to put space and just a few tabs for readability. This is not a problem, okay? You can start a statement, and when you have an operation, for example, this, or if you do an operation with numbers, can be, for example, plus, minus, etc. Here it's going to be double brackets. You can go back to a new line, okay? And that's going to be the same instruction. So I do this, and then std end line. And here the instruction will be finished when I use the semicolon. So hello username, you are user age dot. I'm going to save and run that, and it's going to ask, what is your name? Bob. How old are you? 34. Hello Bob, you are 34. Okay, that's it for the first exercise. Now the second exercise, so let's create a new file here named 1, 2. Here we need to add 2 ints. So I'm going to put add to ints.cpp. And I'm going to include iostream, create a main, so you can see that can be quite fast. Okay, and I have my minimal code. And so the first thing I need to do is to ask the user for 2 different numbers. I'm going to choose to use integer numbers. So int, let's say number 1, int number 2. And now I'm going to give you a tip here is that when you, for example, if you want to create different integer variables like that just for the declaration, what you can do is you can just put int number 1, comma, number 2, and then semicolon, and that's going to create and declare 2 integer variables. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. And then std cout, let's say enter number 1. Okay, std cin, I'm going to put that in number 1, and then std cout enter number 2, std cin inside number 2. After I got the 2 numbers, I can create, for example, another variable, int sum is equal to number 1 plus number 2 semicolon. So this will be the sum of the 2 variables, of the 2 numbers we have given to the program. And finally, I can print the sum, but I'm not just going to print the sum, I'm going to print number 1 plus number 2 is equal to sum. So std cout, I'm going to start with number 1, and then put plus, and then number 2, and then put the equal sign in quotes, and sum, and finally let's put std end line. Because this line is quite long, I'm going to cut it here, for example, like this. The tab here is just so it's more readable, but it's not needed. All right, let's run this. Enter number 1, let's put 6. Enter number 2, let's put 8. You can see 6 plus 8 is equal to 14. So it's working. Great. So that's it for exercise 2. And now let's go to the third exercise where you need to compute the average of a list of numbers. And I'm going to create a new file here. 1, 3, and let's say compute average.cpp. And so as you can see, for each C++ file that we create, we have an executable file then when we run the file. And I'm going to include iostream because we are going to use cout, and then int main return 0. And let's write the program. So the first thing you need to do is to create a vector containing 4 elements. So that's what I'm going to do. Std vector, we use double, okay, here. And let's put the name number list. Okay, number list is equal to, I'm going to initialize them here. Let's say 4.4, 5.5, 6.6, and 7.7, okay, just like that. And of course, here I have an error because I need to include vector. So as you can see, every include line, you are going to put them at the very top of your program before any function and before the main, okay? Now, I need to compute first the sum of the list, then I need to compute the average using the sum and the size or the length of the list. So I'm going to do double sum. So why double? Well, because I'm going to add some double numbers, so I can expect the sum to be a double, and I'm going to use double as well. And this is going to be, I'm going to use the accumulate function. And to use accumulate, I need to include here numeric. as this one I gave it to you in the exercise, you need to include numeric to be able to use accumulate. So accumulate, and then I'm going to put number list dot begin with parentheses, number list dot end with parentheses, and 0. And then I put a semicolon at the very end of the instruction. So once again, no need to understand that, that's a bit more complex. Okay, for now I just gave you the function here so you can do the exercise. So you have the sum of the vector here, and then double, let's compute the average, is equal to sum divided by the length of the array, the number of elements. And how to get that? Well, if you remember, we have a number list dot size function. So the size, you can see here, returns the number of elements in the vector. And once we have that, we can just print the results, std cout, let's say average value in number list, and then average, and then std endline. Okay, and just one thing before I run, just one thing I'm going to fix is just that for the accumulate function, here instead of 0, I'm going to put 0. So 0 here, as you can see, is integer. 0.0 is a double number, okay? And so that's internal behavior of the accumulate, okay? If you put an integer number here, it's going to add them as integers. If you put a double number here, it's going to add them as double. And what's going to happen also is if you use an integer for a float number, what's going to happen is that the number will be truncated. So here, instead of 4.4, you will get 4. Okay, instead of 5.5, you will get 5, here 6 and 7. So you lose the decimal. Here we don't want to lose the decimal. And well, I'm just going to run that. You can see average value in number list 6.05. And so you have the average number of that list, and now you can put any element you want here. This code is going to be the same, okay? And you can compute the average of any vector you want. All right, and that's the end of the level 1 of this course for C++ programming. You can now create your own C++ programs with variables, lists of variables, and you can interact with the user of your program by printing information and asking for input. You also have seen how to take advantage of some of the most useful features of an IDE using Visual Studio Code. Now is the time to get to the next level of C++ and learn how to create more complete programs as well as reusable and readable blocks of code. Writing all the instructions of your program in the main function is fine if you just have a few instructions, but as soon as you want to implement bigger and more complex functionalities, you're going to hit a wall. So in the following lessons, the main focus will be on functions. You will understand what a function is, and we will build different ones for different purposes. You will see how to reuse functions, how to pass parameters to them, make them return a value, etc. I will also talk about a variable scope, which is a super important concept to understand at the beginning, so you won't get weird errors that you don't understand in the following. And I will show you some useful tips to increase the readability of your programs using, for example, comments and namespaces. So at the end of this section, you will be able to write reusable C++ code and to keep your programs easy to read as you make them bigger. And let's get started. Now is the time to start working with functions. And for this new section, I'm going to create a new folder here. I'm going also to right click here and do close all, okay? And right click here and do new folder named basics level 2. And in that folder, right click new file, let's say functions.cpp. And also I'm going to put the minimal structure, so int main and return 0. Also with the include iostream, because we are going to use the cout functionality. Okay, great. So what is a function? A function is basically a block of code that you can reuse later in your program as many times as you want. And why do you need functions? Well, this will help you create building blocks in your program that you can use and reuse on top of each other, so you can increase the complexity of the program without increasing the complexity of your code. Your code will stay clean and will be easy to modify and to maintain. And now, instead of giving you many theoretical explanations, let's dive in and write our first function. And actually, the function we are going to write is not the first function, because the first function we wrote is the int main function, but I'm going to come back to that later. So I'm going to write a function, a very simple function that will do one simple thing. It will just say hello. So I'm going to start with void, and then, so that is the return type of the function. For now, I'm going to put void, which means no return type. And then I'm going to name it, say, hello. So you need to give it a name, and then open and close the parentheses, come back to a new line, or just put brackets here. So you can choose to put brackets like this, okay, or to go back to a new line. And usually what I do, I just go back to a new line, and then inside those brackets, you are going to write the code for the function. As you can see, this is very similar to what we have with the main. And here we don't have any return statement because this is void data type, which means no return. And so what I can do here is just, for example, do std cout hello, and then std end line. So this function, say hello, will just say hello. One thing about the name of the function, so of course you can't put spaces, all right? If you want to put different words, well, you can use, for example, underscore. You can also use camel case, which means that every new word will start with an uppercase. Just for this course, I'm going to use this. This is just a convention I'm using here. Maybe for different projects in the future, you are going to use different conventions, all right? And now, well, what's going to happen if I run this program? So you can see here, well, we don't have anything printed here on the terminal. Why is that? Because we have a cout line, but, well, this is a function. This is the definition of a function, okay? It's not going to do anything by itself. You need to call the function in order to execute the code inside the function. So in the main function will be called directly when you start the program, okay? That's the rule for C++ programs. You need to have a main function that's going to be called, but other functions are not going to be called. So if I want to execute the code inside say hello, I need to call say hello, and you can see I can also use the auto-completion now, say hello from the main. So to call a function, you just put the name of the function, and then open close parentheses, and of course the semicolon. Now if I run the code, you can see I have hello. So you can call a function one time, but also multiple times, okay? If I call say hello 3 times, well, that's going to say hello 3 times. Okay, you can see hello, hello, hello. And now let's say I add a new line, std cout test and std end line. Let's try with that. You can see that we have hello test, hello test, hello test. Okay. So as you can see here, that's very useful. We want to print this 3 times. Well, I just need to write the instructions once, and then I can call it anytime I want in my program. Okay, and one last thing is that if you remember when we used variables, I told you that you have to use meaningful names for variables. So it's going to be much easier for you to read your code later and for other people also to read your code. Well, that's the same thing for functions. If your function is going to say hello, then just name it say hello. If your function is going to initiate a motor, then call it, for example, init motor, okay? Try to make the name of the function as explicit as you can. The function you have seen in the previous lesson is very simple, and it will do the same thing every time you call it, okay? You call it 3 times, it's going to say hello test 3 times. Now you can add parameters to a function to make it more dynamic. A parameter is simply a variable you are going to pass to the function when you call it, and then inside the function you can use that variable to do anything you want. So let's add a parameter. Let's say, for example, so I'm going to remove that. Let's say we want to greet the user, let's say hello username. So I'm going to add a parameter, and where do we add parameters? Here in the parentheses. So for example, std string username. So to add a parameter to a function, you first need to put here the data type of the parameter and the name of the parameter. And so what's going to happen here is that when you call say hello, you're going to provide a string, which is username, which is going to be the variable username in that function. And then you can use username. So for example, I can say hello and then username and then end line. Okay, so I can use the username here that I got from the parameters. And so now, as you can see, I have some errors here, and let's run actually the code to see that we have an error, for example, here, too few arguments to function say hello. Because now the say hello has 1 argument. You need to provide 1 argument, which is going to be the parameter. If you just call say hello without any argument, without any parameter, that's not going to work. So you need to provide 1 argument, which is of type string. So I'm going to say Bob, okay? And this is going to work. And of course, I need also to put it here. Let's say John, and let's remove that. And let's run that code. You can see now it's working, and I have hello Bob, hello John. So the function, as you can see, has the same code for running 2 different things, okay? because of the parameters you pass, you can customize the behavior of the function. Okay, so that's very useful, and you're going to use parameters all the time. You can also add multiple parameters as you want. There is no limit to that. For example, int user age. So now it's going to require a string and an integer. So for example, hello username, and then you are, and then maybe I can go back to a new line here and put the user age. So hello username, you are user age. Okay, and I forgot this. It's better. And now you can see I also have an error, too few arguments in function call, because now I need to provide a string and I need to provide a integer, which I'm going to do. So I'm going to run the code, and you can see hello Bob, you are 34, hello John, you are 36. So that's how you can add parameters to make your functions more dynamic. One very important thing now also is that you need, so when you call the function, you need to provide the parameters in the exact same order, okay, as when you define the function. So the first parameter is going to be the string username. The second parameter is going to be the integer user age. Okay, for example, here if I do 34 and then Bob, well, we are going to have a problem. First, because here it's waiting for, as you can see here, it's waiting for a string here, and we are giving an int. And here, well, it's waiting for int, and we are giving a string. So if you have the two same data types, maybe that's going to work, but then you're going to have some weird behaviors in your code. So make sure that you always respect and you know what is the order of the parameters for a function. So Bob, 34. Great.